everybody out there in YouTube land. So today I'm going to do a review of the Flintstones #1. It's a relatively new comic being put out by DC and Hanna-Barbera. This issue came out in 2016. And just to start with, I really like this comic book run. I've read all 11 issues there are so far, and I'll keep up with it. Just starting out, this cover looks pretty cool. You can see Fred looks a lot less dumpy than he does in the cartoon, the old cartoon. He actually looks kind of cool, and Wilma and Pebbles are featured there too, with some dinosaurs and whatnot. So I'm not going to bother showing the very first panel, and I'll probably skip some of them, just kind of for copyright issues. I don't want to post an entire comic online. But basically the first panel is a couple of scientist type people, and they're in a museum, and they're looking at a caveman, Cro-Magnon guy who's under glass. So moving on from that, we see Fred at the quarry. So he's working away there in Mr. Slate's quarry, and Mr. Slate calls him in to the office and tells him he's got some Cro-Magnons, and he wants basically Fred to show him the ropes and kind of take him out on the town, show him a good time, and kind of basically convince them to work for Mr. Slate, because Mr. Slate knows he can pay them next to nothing. So that's kind of the theme of this particular comic, this issue of it anyway. Each issue is really got something to say, and this first issue is kind of about work and possessions and money and all of that. And it's also got a side story with Wilma being an artist, which you see now. She's got some paintings she's been doing handprints. Okay, so moving on from Wilma, Barney and Fred are apparently veterans from the Paleolithic Wars, and while Fred is out entertaining the Cro-Mags for Mr. Slate, he remembers he has to go to the veterans meeting. So he picks up Barney, and they head over to, I guess their version of the VFW, but it's basically, Veterans of the Paleolithic Wars is what the building is called. And it's really interesting because they kind of delve into, even though it's only the first issue, they kind of delve into post-traumatic stress disorder, and one of the characters kind of has a mini freak out. And moving on, they spend more time entertaining basically the Cro-Mags. They go out to the Outback Snake House and eat some snake and whatnot, and they get some balloons and kind of have fun. Fred heads home, catches up with Wilma, and they see that they have been invited to a party at Mr. Slate's house, an employee hot tub party. So they have to go to that as an upcoming event. Basically, Fred, it jumps to the next day, and Fred tells Mr. Slate about how it went, and Mr. Slate's basically like, you need to try harder. And then we see them working at the quarry, Fred and the Cro-Mags, some heavy labor, and they have quitting time, and then they get paid. And it's a very small amount of money apparently, but the Cro-Mags have no sense of money, so they're just kind of like, what are we supposed to do with this, So Fred calls Wilma and talks to her, or actually, let's see, Wilma calls Fred and tells him that her paintings have been sold, so she's going to be like an artist now, and they're going to go to the gala opening and see her paintings. But first, we see them at the Slate mansion, Mr. Slate's party there. He's having for his employees for some reason, I guess basically just to show off. And he's bullying the Cro-Mags. Mr. Slate's kind of the least likable character in this. He's trying to basically bribe one to eat a spider, but the guy has no concept of money. So he doesn't care. And we get Mr. Slate talking to Fred, and they kind of have a flashback, and well, Fred has a flashback, and he's remembering the war, and you can actually see someone's arm in the flames there. So it looks like some pretty serious business, and we find out more about it in later issues, but for now it's just some foreshadowing. And there's a few more pages, actually quite a few pages, like 5 or 6 or 7 more in the party, and it's just Mr. Slate trying to pay people to do stupid stuff, and one of the Cro-Mags goes for it and ends up falling to his death, and that kind of kills the party. And everyone leaves the party. On the way out, the 2 remaining Cro-Mags, Mr. Slate says, "See you guys tomorrow." And they said, "No, I don't think so. We're leaving Bedrock." And they're like, "No offense, but it seems like the whole point of civilization is to get someone else to do your killing for you." So they said they'll pass on that. And Mr. Slate's mad and basically blames it on Fred until Fred asks if he's going to get the foreman position, and Mr. Slate says, "No, you failed me." And then we jump to the art exhibit. There's a lot going on in this one comic, right? This one issue. So anyways, they jump to Wilma's art exhibit, and basically the art snobs, don't respect her art style, and they put her paintings outside. They aren't even allowing them to be inside the museum. And then we get this really touching story, a little bit of backstory about how Wilma was part of a hunter-gatherer tribe, and they would always put their handprints on the cave walls, and when someone was gone, passed away, they still were able to remember that person by their handprint. So to her, the handprints are really significant, and they mean a lot to her. So that's kind of cool. And she tells this to Fred, and I really love Fred. They've changed him into such a likable, just strong, awesome, masculine character. He's really cool. And he says, "I feel like I never really knew you until this moment." And he says, maybe Mr. Slate was right. Maybe there is such a thing as fate. Basically, he's telling Wilma that he believes they were meant for each other. And in the last panel, we get, or last page, we get a look back to the modern day, and they've got the one Cro-Mag in the glass case still, and they're basically speculating how he died. And that's the end of the first issue. We'll take a look at issue 2 next time, and I highly recommend reading this comic. The art's great, the story is great, the characters are phenomenal. Even Mr. Slate, you're not supposed to like him. He's kind of the villain, but you'll see there's more to him than just a cookie cutter bad guy. So I'll talk to you later. Feel free, to like, share, and subscribe.